Urban exploration had always fascinated Ryan. The thrill of discovering forgotten places, the mystery lurking in the shadows, and the history etched into the decaying walls called to him like a siren song. He had explored countless abandoned factories, decrepit houses, and even a deserted amusement park. But nothing had prepared him for Blackwood Asylum. Located on the outskirts of a small town in the American Midwest, Blackwood Asylum had been abandoned for decades. Rumors of its haunted past were whispered among the locals, but few dared to venture close. Those who did returned with stories of eerie sounds, ghostly apparitions, and an overwhelming sense of dread. Intrigued and undeterred by the tales, Ryan decided to explore the asylum himself, documenting his journey for his growing YouTube channel. It all started with an old, yellowed letter. Ryan had received it in the mail one crisp autumn morning. The letter was unsigned, and the paper felt brittle in his hands. The message was simple: explore Blackwood Asylum, uncover the truth. Beware of the shadows. Excited by the mysterious invitation, Ryan packed his gear: a flashlight, a camera, a voice recorder, and some snacks. He also brought along his friend Mark, who shared his passion for urban exploration. Together, they set off for the asylum, their excitement overshadowing any fear they might have felt. The drive to Blackwood Asylum was uneventful, the countryside passing by in a blur of fall colors. As they approached the asylum, the road became narrower, flanked by dense woods that seemed to close in around them. Finally, they arrived at a rusted iron gate, its hinges creaking in the wind. Beyond the gate lay the asylum, a hulking structure of red brick and broken windows, its facade covered in ivy. Ryan and Mark pushed open the gate and walked up the overgrown path leading to the asylum's entrance. The front doors were ajar, as if inviting them in. Stepping inside, they were greeted by a musty smell and the echo of their footsteps on the tiled floor. The lobby was a time capsule from the early 20th century. Dusty furniture, outdated medical equipment, and faded photographs lined the walls. Ryan felt a chill as he glanced at the photographs, which depicted patients and staff in various states of distress. The asylum's dark history was palpable, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Undeterred, the pair ventured deeper into the asylum. They explored the main hallways, patient rooms, and medical wards, documenting everything on camera. The further they went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Strange noises echoed through the corridors, and shadows seemed to move just out of sight. Mark joked about ghosts, but Ryan could see the unease in his friend's eyes. Hours passed, and the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the broken windows. Ryan suggested they check out the basement, hoping to find something truly unique for his video. They found a staircase leading down into the darkness and descended cautiously. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow hallways and small rooms, each more foreboding than the last. As they turned a corner, they stumbled upon a heavy wooden door with a rusted padlock. Ryan's heart raced as he pulled out a crowbar and pried the lock open. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, they found an old operating room. Rusted surgical instruments lay scattered on a blood-stained table, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with yellowing medical records. Ryan's camera captured everything as he rifled through the records, uncovering disturbing details about the asylum's past. The patients had been subjected to brutal experiments, and many had died under mysterious circumstances. As Ryan read aloud from one of the records, Mark suddenly let out a gasp. Ryan turned to see his friend staring at a small, locked cabinet in the corner of the room. Mark's hands trembled as he reached for the cabinet, and Ryan's curiosity was piqued. Together, they forced it open, revealing a collection of old photographs and a journal. The journal belonged to Dr. Edward Blackwood, the asylum's founder. His entries detailed his descent into madness as he conducted horrific experiments on the patients. He wrote about a dark force that seemed to inhabit the asylum, driving him to commit unspeakable acts. The final entry was the most chilling. "The shadows have claimed me. They whisper in the darkness, guiding my hand. I am lost." As Ryan finished reading the journal, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Mark suggested they leave, but Ryan insisted on exploring further, driven by a morbid curiosity. They left the hidden chamber and continued through the basement, their senses heightened by the discovery. The atmosphere grew more oppressive with each step, and they could hear faint whispers echoing through the halls. It was as if the asylum itself was alive, and it didn't want them there. As they turned a corner, Ryan's flashlight illuminated a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was a woman in a tattered hospital gown, her eyes hollow and lifeless. She reached out towards them, her mouth moving as if to speak. But no sound came out. Mark screamed, and they both turned to run. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, and the whispers grew louder, filling their minds with terror. They stumbled through the darkness, desperate to escape the apparition that seemed to follow them. Finally, they burst through a door and found themselves in the asylum's courtyard. The night air was cold and crisp, and they could see their breath as they panted, trying to calm down. Ryan looked back at the asylum, its windows dark and foreboding. He knew they had to leave, but he also knew he couldn't leave the mystery unsolved. Despite their fear, Ryan and Mark decided to return to the asylum the next day. They had to uncover the truth about Dr. Blackwood and the dark force that haunted the place. Armed with more equipment and a newfound determination, they retraced their steps through the asylum. In the daylight, the building seemed less menacing, but the sense of unease remained. They headed back to the basement, hoping to find more clues in the hidden chamber. As they entered the room, they noticed something strange. The journal and photographs were missing. Panic set in as they realized they weren't alone. Someone or something had been there since their last visit. Ryan scanned the room with his camera, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was stalking them. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the basement, and the lights went out. In the darkness, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. Ryan fumbled for his flashlight, but it wouldn't turn on. He felt a cold hand grip his arm, and he swung the flashlight wildly, hitting nothing but air. Mark's voice called out in the darkness, but it was distant and muffled, as if he were trapped in another room. Ryan's mind raced as he tried to find his friend. The shadows seemed to close in around him, suffocating him with their presence. He stumbled through the pitch-black halls, the whispers growing louder and more frantic. Finally, he saw a faint light ahead and ran towards it, desperate for an escape. He burst into a small room and found Mark huddled in a corner, his eyes wide with terror. The light was coming from an old lantern on a table, casting long shadows on the walls. Ryan grabbed the lantern and helped Mark to his feet. They had to find a way out before the shadows consumed them. As they made their way through the basement, they stumbled upon another hidden room. This one was filled with strange symbols and ancient artifacts. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and dark. Ryan felt drawn to the mirror, and as he approached, he saw his reflection twist and distort. The whispers grew louder, and he realized they were coming from the mirror itself. He reached out to touch the glass, and the room was suddenly filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, they found themselves in a different part of the asylum. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air was thick with the scent of burning incense. In the center of the room stood an altar covered in black candles and bones. Ryan realized they had stumbled upon a ritual chamber. Dr. Blackwood had been using dark magic to to summon the shadows, and they were now trapped in his twisted world. The only way to escape was to break the curse and banish the shadows for good. With the lantern in hand, Ryan and Mark searched the chamber for clues. They found an old, leather-bound book filled with ancient incantations and rituals. Ryan's hands shook as he read aloud from the book, hoping to find a way to banish the shadows. As he spoke the words, the room began to tremble, and the shadows coalesced into a single, towering figure. It was Dr. Blackwood, his eyes glowing with malevolent power. He reached out towards them, his voice a cacophony of whispers. "You cannot escape," he hissed. "The shadows are eternal." Ryan and Mark stood their ground, chanting the incantations from the book. The air grew thick with tension as the shadows swirled around them, their whispers rising to a deafening roar. Ryan's voice trembled, but he continued to recite the words, determined to break the curse and free themselves from the asylum's grasp. As Ryan reached the final words of the incantation, the shadows surged forward, engulfing him and Mark in darkness. For a moment, it felt as if they were suspended in a void, the weight of the shadows pressing down on them. Ryan's breath came in shallow gasps, his vision blurring as he struggled to maintain consciousness. Just when it seemed the shadows would consume them entirely, a blinding light erupted from the altar, driving the darkness back. The shadows writhed and screamed, their forms disintegrating in the brilliance. Dr. Blackwood's ghostly figure was caught in the light, his expression twisted in agony as he was pulled apart by the force of the ritual. The light intensified, filling every corner of the room, and then, with a final flash, it was gone. Ryan and Mark collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The oppressive presence of the shadows had vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. The asylum felt different now, as if a weight had been lifted from its very walls. Ryan and Mark staggered to their feet, their bodies aching from the ordeal. The chamber around them was now devoid of the dark symbols and artifacts, replaced by the same decaying walls and broken furniture that filled the rest of the asylum. The mirror stood cracked but harmless, its surface reflecting only their weary faces. "We did it," Mark said, his voice hoarse. "We actually did it." Ryan nodded, too exhausted to speak. He glanced down at the book in his hands, the pages now blank and crumbling to dust. Whatever power had been contained within it was gone, expended in the ritual that had banished the shadows. They made their way back through the asylum, the oppressive atmosphere now replaced by a sense of stillness. The sun was beginning to rise as they emerged into the courtyard, the first rays of light casting a warm glow over the asylum's facade. Back at home, Ryan reviewed the footage they had captured. The camera had recorded everything: the hidden chamber, the ritual, and even the moment when the shadows were banished. As he watched, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. In the background of one of the shots, a figure stood in the shadows, watching them. It was a woman in a tattered hospital gown, the same apparition they had seen in the hallway. Curious, Ryan did some research and discovered that she was one of Dr. Blackwood's first patients, a woman named Emily. She had been subjected to his cruel experiments and had died under mysterious circumstances. Her spirit had lingered in the asylum, trapped by the dark magic that Dr. Blackwood had wielded. With the curse broken, Ryan hoped that Emily's spirit, and those of the other patients, had finally found peace. He decided to dedicate his video to them, telling their stories and revealing the truth about what had happened at Blackwood Asylum. Ryan's video became an overnight sensation, drawing viewers from around the world. The haunting footage and the chilling story captivated audiences, and his channel's subscriber count skyrocketed. But more importantly, the video brought attention to the asylum's dark past, sparking interest in preserving the site as a historical landmark. Ryan and Mark returned to the asylum one last time, this time accompanied by a team of historians and paranormal investigators. Together, they uncovered more of the asylum's secrets, piecing together the tragic history of the patients and staff who had suffered there. As they stood in the now silent halls of Blackwood Asylum, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The shadows had been banished, the truth had been revealed, and the spirits of the past could finally rest in peace. He knew that he would never forget the experience, and that the asylum would always hold a special place in his heart.